Moderator, co-founder and a co-CEO of U2U Network. Please join us.
Hi, hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being with us today. So my name is Chloe. I'm a co-founder and co-CEO of U2 Network. We are modular DePIN layer 1 and backed by IDG Capital, the one that backed like more than unicorn around the world, and also KuCoin Venture, Web3 and so on. So my honor to be the moderator of our panel today. They've been the backbone of the future network. And joining me the panel today, there is some other gentlemen here, so I will give them the chance to answer, to introduce about themselves and also the project that they are working.
Hi guys, first and foremost, thank you so much Mizzle team for inviting me to this panel discussion. We are a liquidity staking protocol. It's a lending and borrowing protocol for the largest decentralized storage, DePIN primitive, which is known as FILLiquid. FILLiquid has been around since 2014, and of course today is comfortably seated at about a total of market cap is 2 billion. When we think about storage, of course, oftentimes we think about FILLiquid. So ever since FILLiquid has established a FVM since last year, which is compatible with EVM, we have actually built a lending and borrowing protocol, and hence we have gone through two rigorous testing of testnet, and we just launched our mainnet, which was about 6 weeks ago, and right now we are reaching TVL of 3M. So essentially, it's just very simple. Like if there's any FILLiquid holders, we allow the FILLiquid holders to lend, lease, to and stake to make higher passive income. And of course, on the borrowing side, it's where we actually encourage the borrowers, which is known as the storage providers, to loan the FILLiquid directly from the liquidity pool. So as to date, we are the only fully decentralized open source with a governance tokens among all the lending and staking protocols for the FILLiquid.
Hey everyone, I'm Pankaj, the head of protocol from Witness Chain team. Thanks for having me here, Mizzle team. So what Witness Chain is building is sort of trust layer for DePINs. You can think of it as a physical asset verification layer for DePINs. So as we see, what blockchains enabled was trustlessly executing any digital state transition, and anyone can sort of come and permissionlessly build innovative digital applications on top of it. What DePINs are trying to do is bring the similar decentralized innovation to the infrastructure space, but this sort of trust layer is lacking for them, and we sort of come in and build this trust layer for the DePINs where we can validate various physical attributes for these DePIN nodes like location, bandwidth, performance, storage capacities, and more. And this has multiple applications down the line where you can, for example, once you have verified certain physical assets, you can tokenize them in a permissionless manner and let's say build a commodities market on top of it, fully permissionless. Or you can enable low latency applications based on real-time location for the DePIN nodes, right? If you're doing some kind of edge application, let's say you want to use your neighbor's GPU for gaming, you can only do it if you're sure that the GPU exists close to you. And many such applications, and also like compliance, and the list is endless. But essentially, all of this comes as an crypto-economically secure platform, and we bootstrapped it as an AVS on EigenLayer. We are currently secured by more than $7 billion in crypto-economic security on mainnet, and we have like 35 plus partners on the DePIN side. We're working with plenty of teams here also, with Akash, with U2U, and with Mizzle also. So that's sort of an overview of Witness Chain and what we are building. Happy to be here. Thanks.
Hey everyone, my name is Anil Murthy, and I lead the product and engineering team at Overclock Labs. Overclock Labs is the creator of Akash Network, and Akash Network, if you're not familiar with it, is the world's first super cloud. Akash network got started about 5 years ago. We launched our mainnet in 2019. So we pretty much coined the word DePIN in some ways. So we've had compute resources on the network for 5 years now. We introduced GPU support a year and a half ago. And since then, we've seen a huge number of applications being run on Akash, everything ranging from static websites to databases to AI inference apps, training apps, all sorts of things. The big benefits that people get from using Akash is primarily around the fact that there is a huge number of locations where there's compute resources available, significantly larger already than the centralized clouds. And then most of the resources are available at a significantly lower cost than traditional cloud companies. We have seen a huge amount of interest from obviously Web3 companies, but more recently from Web2 companies as well. Some of the big examples of users that are using Akash today include a project called Venice.ai. You can check out Venice.ai. It's essentially a open alternative to ChatGPT, and that uses Akash today, so they run on Akash. There's also a company called Brev.dev, which actually ironically got acquired by NVIDIA recently. They are a customer of Akash, so technically NVIDIA is also a customer of Akash at this point. And then there is another company called Prime Intellect that's building, that's training new AI models, and they're using Akash for that as well. The one thing that differentiates Akash, apart from the fact that we have actual real users running on our network now, is the fact that we're radically open source. So literally all of our source code is open, and everything that is done on Akash is done in a radically open source way as well.
Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. So I'm Arjun Mishra. We just started Mizzle Cloud a couple of months back. We've raised like $1.5 million in pre-seed. The problem we're trying to solve is the enterprise's problem to use and access the decentralized layers that is there. And apart from that, deploy applications much more easily on the platform and the infrastructure that is there in the DePIN ecosystem. Today, what we find is developers find it very, very difficult and need specific DevOps engineers to actually do this task. What we'll be creating is an AI-based layer, which will help them do it much more easily. And I think in the times to come, the focus on enterprise is what will decide how the next infrastructure of DePIN comes along. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for the introduction. So when I had a chat with Anil downstairs, he asked me like, why do we need a layer 1 for DePIN? So that inspired me for a question for you gentlemen. Do you think we need DePIN? Do the world need DePIN? Do humans need DePIN?
So I think to begin first, to really understand, to dissect the understandings of DePIN, I'll try my level best to explain DePIN in the simplest way that where even I hope my 5-year-old nieces will even understand. Now, assuming all of us here want to build a very large playground, but we don't have enough resources, so each and every one of us will bring something that either myself will bring a slide, probably this gentleman over here right beside me will bring a swing, probably the 2 other gentlemen will bring a toys. And hooray, right now, we will able to build a playground that all of us will get to play together. But essentially, because all of us are bringing something to contribute to this large playground that we want to play together, and there's nobody, there's not only one person will be taking charge of the paying everything. So hence, all of us combining together, we were able to play this playground together by deploying these resources, in this one big playground together. Essentially, the benefits of this playground is where, number one, there's no single entity is taking over the playground. Number two, we are all contributing it together to build to a larger and more fun playgrounds than we ever imagined. And number three, that we are all sharing these resources together. Now, to bring back the question of whether do we need DePIN, I mean, let's get real. The narrative of DePIN today, if DePIN doesn't exist today, we still were able to survive. The world will still continue, right? But if we look at it as at the narrative of how DePIN is growing, personally, I'm super bullish with DePIN. The question is when DePIN will really reach the mass adoption. That still really lingers as a $1 million question mark. But if we ask today yourself, there are already a lot of projects that are incentivizing the community. Probably are more familiar with the storage. If we are talking about decentralized data storage, it has given a great challenge to the centralized storage. 1 terabyte of a data storage will cost you 17 cents, and versus with a centralized storage, which is $22 and $23. And we are talking about 122x cheaper. With the AI era that we're living in today, there's two biggest superfood which are needed. It's compute power and also data storage. And here we are asking ourselves, like any entities or any enterprise out there, if you want to keep growing your data storage, it's no-brainer for any entities to be going forward with a decentralized data storage. And of course, I'm seeing a lot of other probably verticals will be shaped simply because DePIN, for the first time ever, allowing the incentive mechanism that all of us coming together to be contributing into one that's not being monopolized by one player, by one entity, and essentially we're all rewarded at the same time. And I think that is something that I'm very, very stoked to be looking forward to how DePIN will be shaping the entire ecosystem. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay, so not for 5-year-olds answer. I'll probably give more technical and philosophical part of it. Philosophy-wise, I think what blockchain fundamentally brought to our world, let's say what Satoshi did in his Bitcoin work was bridge the global divide of trust in financial applications. His goal was more about having this single currency or single digital asset that can be traded globally without anyone being able to regulate or stop you from doing that. And similar innovation coming to infrastructure layer is what DePIN is. And DePIN as a term is not something, as a term is new, but as a concept is not something very new. Filecoin has been building it for much longer than when the DePIN term actually came in. Similarly, a lot of other networks and this concept has been around for quite some while now. DePIN just brought it all together under a shared umbrella, which everyone understands and sort of can relate to. There were a lot of projects which were already building, and they were like, oh, I don't know which narrative I should tie up to, and now they're like, oh yeah, I am DePIN. But they were already doing this. And that's for a good reason, because it's actually very necessary. If you look at the where our world is headed, right now if you want to deploy any large-scale infra, let's say you want to deploy a 5G network, that's only possible by two kind of entities. One is very big corporates, we call them like dinosaurs or monsters, and the others are governments because they are very, very capital intensive and requires and also very regulated. What DePIN enables us to expand this much broader, so you don't need one single entity to put up a very large amount of capital. Community can sort of contribute in their own locality to whatever resource they have to bootstrap this network much faster. And then the prices go down significantly, again, because a single party don't control all this infrastructure, and it's totally market driven. Third, if you think about existing resources, so DePINs are two types. One where you require specialized hardware and you deploy new resources. The other where you reutilize existing resources. So in the DePINs where you reutilize existing resources, you're sort of solving a global optimization problem of resources, where resources always existed at some place and they were cheaper there because there's no demand but a lot of supply. At some other place globally, there's a lot of demand but there's no supply. And now you can sort of bridge this globally in a permissionless manner. And this goes back to the philosophy from which the goes back to the basis of the decentralization philosophy. So I think DePIN is very necessary and probably more so because of the ownership aspect, so that nobody actually tells you what you need to pay for certain resource, physical resource, and it's probably just driven by markets. Yeah, that's
Yeah, so first of all, I'll caveat this by saying that I'm going to only talk about the value of DePIN in the context of compute networks, because that's what we do. I don't know much about the other types of DePINs. And then specifically, what I think matters the most at the end of the day is whenever you think about a new technology or a new product or a service, what new user value does it drive? That's literally what it comes down to. If there's no new user value being driven, then we're just wasting our time. So with those two in mind, for compute, if you look at back, the last 20 years, the biggest change that has happened in terms of how people consume compute is that we went from people running their own data centers for everything that they want to do, to people using cloud resources. So if you look back at like 2005 or 2006, when AWS and Amazon invented the concept of a cloud, basically the idea was at that point, if you were a startup with 2 people or 10 people or 50 people, and you wanted to build a product or a service, the barrier to entry was really high. Meaning, if you wanted to get started, then you had to have a huge amount of capital that you had to go and invest in standing up a data center or allocating resources in some data center where you can spin up servers to bring up your service, right? So that basically limited the number of people that can get started with various things. What the cloud did was basically enable people to get started with relatively low cost. And what that led to over time is a significant amount of innovation happening as a result of people being able to create startups really fast, right? If you now fast forward to the last couple of years and look at what's been going on with the startup ecosystem, a big shift obviously is people building AI applications. And the primary need on the compute side when you think about AI is accelerated compute, and more commonly known as GPUs right now, but generally accelerated compute. And so when you think about accelerated compute and the need for it for building anything AI, the challenge with that is there is one company in the world that makes all the accelerated compute today, which is NVIDIA. And there's only so much they can produce in terms of GPUs. And so what that does is it creates a scarcity for these types of chips in the world. And so what ends up happening is that if you want to build an AI application or you want to offer an inference service today, you're locked out from being able to do that because there is limited availability of this hardware. So for example, today, if you want to take the leading open source AI model, which is Meta Llama 3.1, and run it and do inference with it, it's a really capable model. The problem is it requires 8 H100 GPUs to run at minimum. And if you're talking about like a highly quantized version of it, it could require 16 or even 24 GPUs to run. The challenge is if you go to AWS and try to get it from AWS, they'll require you to commit to 64 of these GPUs and do that for 3 months to 1 year. And that's a huge amount of expenditure upfront for you, which is effectively killing the cloud model. So if you take all that together, what's happened as a result of this huge demand for GPUs and only one company being able to produce them is we're back to the old days of people that can innovate, other people that have to have a huge amount of capital upfront. So that's basically the problem. So the question now is how does DePIN solve this problem? DePIN is just a term, but how does basically decentralization solve this problem? The way it solves it is by essentially making people be able to share their compute. So with a network like Akash, for example, let's say a bigger company today or even a mid-sized startup decides to go and do a commit to AWS and get a huge number of these GPUs. They might use the GPU cluster for training for 1 month and not use it for the next month. So the time that they're not using it, they can bring it on Akash and make it available to somebody else, right? So you're effectively monetizing the capital expenditure that you put into your into building your business and being able to reap some of the costs that you've or get back some of the costs that you've invested in it. So that's one big benefit. The other big benefit of decentralized networks, at least compute networks, is that because anybody can essentially participate in providing compute, there's enough data centers in the world with compute that have excess capacity that's not being utilized. And I'm talking about general compute at this point. So what benefit it brings is that as we scale up, for example, Akash today has 65 different providers of compute across the world. So think of these as individual data centers, 65 of them across the world. This is already more than what Azure or AWS has in terms of regions. Why is this important? The reason it's important is because the more locations you have in the world, the lower the latency for the applications that are trying to run on them. So if you're, for example, trying to build an application, I don't know, in Vietnam, for example, there is no data center for AWS in Vietnam today. So if you have users trying to use an application in Vietnam, they're going to go over to the nearest country that AWS has a data center in, and that's going to cause a huge amount of latency. If Akash reaches a scale where we have hundreds or thousands of providers, which we hope to get to in the next few years, then we could potentially have a situation where we have a data center in every single country and maybe even every single city of the world, right? So that's a huge benefit as well. So those are probably the two biggest benefits I can think of. And cost is another benefit. So regular compute, for example, on Akash can be as low as 80% cheaper than what you can get on traditional services. So.
I completely agree with what Anil said. I would just like to add that, of course, DePIN is just a form of an RWA, actually. I mean, it's actually a subset of RWA. We're just taking real-world physical assets and tokenizing them for providers or anybody in a way so that they can actually, you can raise more funds much more easily and make it accessible to those people also to start earning money. And for the other side of for the tenancy side of the market, it makes it much more easier and cheaper, as he mentioned, for them to access all of those resources, which right now are running in a very centralized environment. On the other end, there are other benefits also. For example, as we know, absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? Today, Google running Gemini has access to so much of our data that if they continue, or these centralized AI systems continue to run at the way they are, we risk a lot of things. For example, I had one of my data inside my Google Sheets, and when I asked Gemini about it, it knew that data. So that, there are things that are happening on the back end wherein for the AI systems to grow in future, we need a decentralized ecosystem which is actually running them. So there is also a need coming in from the regulatory side on how do you control the pace at which the AI and the blockchain ecosystem is expanding. And to control that, DePINs could be one of the platforms that could help them do that. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for all the answer. This question is not on the question list that I share with them at all, but all the answer make me so happy. Yeah, so to conclude on that, do we need DePIN? Do humans need DePIN? Do the world need DePIN? After hearing all the answer, I think we don't need DePIN. But DePIN is the innovation, right? That democratize how we access into all the resources in the world, like GPU, file storage, and also data for AI. And as well, it's also have to create clear the single point of failure in the traditional system. And it's also have that to reduce significantly the cost, the operation cost of startup or enterprise if we use decentralized GPU from Akash, or for example file storage, right? Like Ether already mentioned, 220 times cheaper if we use decentralized file storage. So going to the next question. So guys, last bull run, everyone say GameFi gonna make blockchain going to mass adoption, right? For this cycle, many people also believe that DePIN gonna bring blockchain into mass adoption. So do you agree with that statement? And give me some example of some exciting DePIN product or project that you think that can make that statement become true. How about I start with Mizzle? Sure. Yeah.
So, I think, mass adoption comes, who are the companies who actually have real users right now? They are the legacy systems. So for example, we have a partnership going on with one of the telecom operators where we will be shifting the storage and offering it to the users, all of their users, to shift additional storage onto a decentralized platform. Now that creates that gives us an accessibility to a huge network of users. We have to find different ways in which we acquire the next 100 million or a billion users onto the crypto ecosystem. And for doing that, actually, DePINs could be the best platform. I mean, storage is the biggest play in this, and it could be the next thing that helps DePIN acquire the next $1 trillion on crypto. Yeah.
I guess the question was, which project do you believe is going to actually gain mass adoption? I'm very bullish on Akash for obvious reasons, or else I wouldn't be doing what I do. But the reasons for why. So the reasons for why is very simple, which is if you want to be able to gain mass adoption, you need two things. You need a real problem, a pain point that exists in the user base that you're going after that gives them a reason for them to consider your solution. And then second, you need a easy way for them to transition to your product or service. That's it. You need those two things. If you have those two things, then unless you execute really badly, you have a good chance of gaining mass adoption. And so specifically speaking of Akash, those two things, number one, I talked about the pain point, which is if you're a startup today trying to build an AI application or do something with AI, you're pretty much locked out of being able to do that because of the reasons that I mentioned before. And Akash, if we can execute well, essentially is positioned to solve that problem. The second part of it is how do you make it such that it's not a huge barrier for the customers to transition from whatever service or solution they're using today to using your solution. And on that vein, essentially what we're doing to make that happen is solving two problems. Number one, making it such that the blockchain and the wallets and the tokens are just the means in which the coordination of resources happens, but it's not something that the user needs to see. So effectively what you'll see on Akash later this year is any user that goes onto console.akash.network, which is basically our equivalent of AWS console, they can get started on using Akash without ever knowing that it's running on a blockchain, without ever knowing that it has a token, without ever knowing that it's a decentralized network. And so pretty much the same user experience that you can get from a traditional cloud or a traditional platform as a service like Vercel or Netlify or anything else that you might know of. So being able to solve that problem and make it look like it's just another cloud service, even though there's a blockchain underneath and there's tokens underneath that are used for coordination of all these resources, from an end user perspective, it looks exactly the same. So that's basically what we got to solve. Once we solve that, and then bring value in terms of being able to give access to these high-end GPUs, and then lower cost on all the other types of compute, then we'll get huge mass adoption, and I'm very confident about that.
Yeah, I think I double-click with what Anil said. User experience plays a huge role. Even now, not just in DePIN, in all of crypto, I think user experience is horrible. Bringing new users into Web3 is very tremendous. And with all the modular narrative that's going on, which is good for scalability, but it fragments liquidity and kind of destroys user experience even further. And I know there are some projects trying to fix for that. There are chain abstraction projects. There are projects like Aglayer from Polygon that's trying to fix the liquidity problem and more. But I think, again, like Anil said, if you can make a experience for the user, which is sort of indistinguishable from a Web3 application to a Web2 application, even in DePIN's case, in this case, like a Web2 cloud service versus a cloud service that's running over a DePIN network, that definitely has a lot of good signals for or good ways to get mass adoption compared to something that is more crypto native. That said, I think crypto space itself can also expand thanks to DePIN. But what's lacking right now is education. I don't think a lot of people, even within crypto space, understand exactly what DePIN is or how it functions and more. Going outside DePIN space, going outside crypto space and bringing in more users into DePIN to crypto via DePIN is a much more difficult challenge, and probably abstracting it away completely is the way to go. Will it happen this cycle? Probably not. But yeah, there's definitely scope in future.
So I partially agree and partially disagree, so I guess some of the narrative. I think before we talk about the mass adoption, I think the part that I really agree most is it's first, we really have to identify what are really the real challenges of DePIN. So I personally, going back to how I explained DePIN, that's now the playground, right? I always test it with my 5-year-old niece and my 70-year-old plus mom. And if they don't understand, which means that everything is still very complex. I tried to train my mom to use a MetaMask for 5 years, and till today she still doesn't know how to, so I've given up other way. So yes, the UI UX part of DePIN, it's so complex. And I think the word DePIN is decentralized physical infrastructure. It's already so complex, and just trying to jump on it, it's really far more challenging, right? And the next thing is, I think if we talk about scalability, yeah, I mean, we have the incentive, mechanism, rewarding people. Everybody loves to be rewarded, the community. But let's look at it, the DePIN is still relying very much on a single node. And that node, to maintain that consistency, it's also a real question mark as well, that how to balance, to strike that balancing grounds for that. The next thing is, I also want to touch on interoperability as well, to how to interoperate between the physical infrastructure and also the decentralized network as well. And it becoming very complex at the same time. And how are we able to have that seamless integration between these two networks coming together. And hence, if the interoperability it's not smooth, and hence, then everyone will be caught up, not achieving the kind of mass adoption that we want to. And the last part is that one of the greatest challenge I think DePIN is going to face, and it's just in time to come, it's also the regulation and the compliance as well. While everything is still so unclear, it's still very vague, and how DePIN players will able to solve that huge question mark on that regulation and the compliance, and asking ourselves, here I am also asking, do the DePIN players also have an answer for, to solve that compliance and the regulatory, if they really will start intervening. And you know how regulation works, right? And regulatory bodies will only start intervening if the mass adoption happens, because then that's where the huge new influx of money flowing into this vertical. However, nonetheless, on the question that I'm also very excited with some of the what I want to see is some of the innovation that I believe DePIN will be disrupting. It's number one, I think healthcare. I always have this belief in these theories that where healthcare DePIN will play such an instrumental role. Now, what I understand before I tell a real story. What I understand is in the States, the medical history can only be kept for 7 years. And after that, subsequently, it will be reset, which means the healthcare and the medical center, the medical practitioner do not have the history of the medical history of the individual. Now, my mom, back to my mom again, there's always a lot of story about my mom. 7 years ago, this was pre-COVID, she was almost diagnosed with cancer. And the current place that I'm in, where I'm based right now in Kuala Lumpur, we went over to 3 different private hospitals. And can you believe that 3 different private hospitals is telling you a different diagnosis result? And guess what? The biggest joke is the 4th private hospital that we went to, they lost the medical record of my mom. And they can't even complete the diagnosis. Now, and this is where I personally think, and there's no other better time than now with post-COVID and all. Imagine every individual, every one of us, were able to own our own healthcare data. And that data belongs to you. Probably maybe one thing I'm looking forward to see is it's our integrate with a wearable tag. And with our healthcare, which I know there's some players that are building that, probably maybe you guys might know that. But yes, I think that would definitely be a huge paradigm shift to the healthcare. And DePIN plays that important role that every individual will be incentivized by us giving the data to the healthcare, to the health center. But of course, I also foresee there will be one huge challenge that where the ministries of health will be intervening, government will be intervening, and that's where I'm talking about the whole big picture where compliance and regulatory board is going to be coming in. The other thing that I'm very excited to see where DePIN plays also a pivotal role is that EV cars is, are growing and skyrocketing. Now imagine every one of us gets to own an EV charging station, or probably maybe not individually, maybe 4 of us can own an EV charging station, and we allow other EV cars to charge, and we make money from there. Over here, the e-hailing ride is so expensive. We came here just now with the heavy downpour just now. It took me about like $20 to come here from Gangnam. I personally think that's really costly, guys. Now imagine what DePIN is were able to do. Literally disrupt the decentralized entity. Imagine we have a decentralized infrastructure of an e-hailing ride, and canceling and striking off the intermediary, the centralized intermediary, and that's something definitely looking forward to see. And I think I mean I was Bali 1 week ago for the CoinFest Bali. I was speaking there. It was also a lot of DePIN that where allow individuals to be owning property and undivided land fraction. And 2 years ago, when I was in Bali, it was right at the early stage. And now a lot of the undivided land fraction players in Bali, it's mushrooming. And I think that will also have a spill over to a more urban city, allowing us to be either owning physical infrastructure, and in a very fractional ownership. And I think this is where DePIN will definitely were able to reach its mass adoption, and once people fully understand about the context and the entire narrative of DePIN.
Thank you. So I heard the answer from the gentlemen. So for me personally, like, can DePIN bring blockchain into mass adoption? It definitely can, but we need some kind of like innovation within DePIN. That, as you know, like DePIN is basically a marketplace, right? One is a contribution, one contributor, and one is demand. If we can have the idea that both sides are involved with individual, not just one side individual and the other side enterprise, then we can say like DePIN can make blockchain into mass adoption in much faster scale and much faster speed, right? So for me, it's Akash can bring DePIN to mass adoption. According to my opinions, then I think not really, but Akash is the legacy project within DePIN. It has been here for 5 years, and they have really a long vision. 5 years ago, they already see the importance of decentralized GPU, right? So I think like nowadays, within the blockchain industry, how much we believe on DePIN, we need to thank to project like Akash. And I can give one example of an innovation within the DePIN, one project, which is actually our flagship product. We build that product on top of our DePIN subnet. And one side is an individual who have unused bandwidth resources. They can contribute into the network. And we are the first one within the DePIN sector of the DePIN that been able to launch in the mobility node. So I have my phone, I download the app, I contribute the 3G Wi-Fi into the network. And the other startup within DePIN, they still launch online Google Chrome extension. And nowadays everyone have phone, not carry phone with them, right? And when I go sleep, I can just turn on my phone and I make money on that. And the other side is like individual who need to use VPN to access into some of the website with the bandwidth with their IP, or they need more privacy or security. So that is one of the example I can say that I believe that can bring DePIN into mass adoption. So with that product, we already gain like more than 160,000 nodes worldwide, cover more than 170 countries. So last time I talked to Mirana Venture, they say, wow, how you can cover the whole global like that? Because for them, like project startup, usually they roll region by region. For example, like when they conquer Asia, then they go to other part of the world. But for us, we just launched, and after 2 months, we have user on over 170 countries. So that, in my opinion. So yeah, I think like we run out of time, guys. We have only 30 minutes for our panel, and we just like 2-3 questions. But I think like we already like talk and discuss a lot of important things about DePIN. And thank you so much for everyone to still be here and listening to us. And thank you so much for joining me today on the panel.
Yeah, one photo together, please.